Talk Live with search engine optimization and marketing experts Robert O'Haver, Michelle Stinson-Ross, and Matt Weber. Powered by the Robert Palmer family of companies.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Search Talk Live. We have a special episode today. I am so excited. We've got Michelle Stinson-Ross in the studio live with us.
Woohoo!
We also have Matt Weber.
Great
it
to
is
be here.
a all hands on deck show. So, Michelle, tell them a little bit about yourself.
I am the VP of Marketing and Search at Gruen Digital Marketing. We are a full stack marketing agency, and I am in Orlando because I was speaking at the Merge conference this week.
Nice. How'd that go?
Went really well.
Awesome.
Really well.
And
And I
Matt?
see you got stuck in Orlando traffic coming over.
A little bit of the construction traffic, yeah. That was fun.
And Matt?
I'm Matt Weber, the president of Roar Internet Marketing, a digital agency right here in Orlando.
Yes, local. All right, guys, those of you tuning into Search Talk Live for the first time, Search Talk Live is a digital marketing podcast. We talk about everything to do with digital marketing. It could be content marketing, which is Michelle's specialty. We have SEO and
Paid. We do paid.
We do it all. But we try to cover everything we can so that everybody gets a little bit of some nuggets here and there during the show. And I think I'd have to say, I've been in the show, I've been in the business for a long time, and I still every single show get something out of it.
Yeah, it's a great show to crack open your Google Doc and keep a running list of not only tips, but also tools. A lot of our guests bring great tools to use. And you and I have discovered some tools that we hadn't heard of that we're using as part of our daily practice.
Yeah, absolutely.
I actually take my notes on Twitter.
Nice.
Yeah,
So
she live tweets.
When I'm not in front of a mic, I will be live tweeting on the Search Talk Live hashtag, which you guys can do as well, by the way. Just because I'm not there doesn't mean you can't tweet.
Yeah, and you can get your questions in using hashtag Search Talk Live, and we'll answer the questions live on the show. We are monitoring that right now. And as a special treat, Michelle brought in her computer, so we're doing live on Facebook. You can actually see what we look like live on Search Talk Live's Facebook page. So without further ado, let's get started. Today we're going to talk about keyword research and content strategy, to the elements that help you to rank your content on the big search engines. So today our special guest, Dan Shure, he's the co-owner of Evolving SEO. And Dan, how's it going?
Excellent. How are you?
Good. Glad to have you on.
Likewise.
Yeah. So let's dive into it. You guys want to dive into it now?
Let's
get
dive into
started.
this.
All right. So remember, you get your questions in, go into hashtag Search Talk Live on Twitter, and we'll answer your questions as we go. Dan, let's start from the very beginning, from the research you have to do to laying in the content, what needs to be done, and all that stuff.
Sure. I'll even go back a little bit further and tell a quick story of a client that I just did a project for.
Sweet.
This client sells high-end products on an e-commerce website.
Mm-hmm.
And we've done no link building for them, but I wanted to find a way to grow their traffic, as I do with all clients, of course. And so I came to them with some content ideas based upon keyword research. And they published a lot of these. One in particular has done really, really well. It's got thousands and thousands of visits in just a few months, again, with no link building. But the thing that I noticed was not only was their traffic increasing for the blog post, but their product landing page traffic was increasing via search as well. And so I tell this quick story to illustrate one of the many reasons I love doing content marketing with SEO and smart keyword research, because not only are you going to get the traffic from that blog post or that article, but I've seen the results of that and the benefit spill into all of these other areas, including ranking your product pages even better. I've even said lately it's kind of like link building, but just with content.
Sure.
Because I think Google's looking at these co-occurring, generic words in the search query that's leading people to the content, and then Google is thus ranking that website better for that topic. And so I love this idea of content. I really believe in it. And one reason might be because I'm not the type to be, hitting the pavement for 90 hours doing outreach and trying to link build and all this crazy stuff that some people do. I think that's great. I've done it. I've been there. But I love the idea of being able to just publish content, let Google find that, and then have your audience discover it.
So let's break that down even further. What did you do to discover that keyword phrase that was going to turn out to be productive?
Yeah, I have a very simple process. I've broken it down in a few videos. I'd be happy to give you the links. But my process is really like this nowadays. My first step is to find what I call seed keywords. This means the broad various topics that could potentially lead to maybe a long tail topic that you would then publish a piece of content around. So let's say you sell shoes. You might start with the idea of footwear or shoes. Go to one of two tools. Go to BuzzSumo's Question Analyzer tool or Moz's Keyword Explorer. If you enter a topic in there, it's going to spit out back to you all these relating topics. So running, jogging, footwear, sandals. It's going to give you all these kind of tangent topics that maybe would be hard for you to brainstorm on your own, especially if you're not in that industry, if you're doing SEO for a client. Then from there, my process is to dive in and figure out what are all the long tails off of those topics using a tool like Answer the Public or using a tool like keywordtool.io or even just going to Google and using AutoSuggest. It's a very manual process, and it requires a lot of persistence. You know, earlier today I was thinking I liken it to like mining, right, or like digging for gold. Yeah. You really have to look and look and look and look to find those opportunities.
That's well said. Dan, let me ask you, for the listeners, how did that particular case study, how did you set that up? Was it a blog on an external domain or within the same domain?
Yeah, it was a blog. So this client didn't even have a blog to begin with. That was step number one. Is I went to them, and the reason why I recommended the blog, and I don't do this for all clients, I noticed that in their industry there is a ton of old school forum activity. Like, there's like old design forums. There's a ton of that. There's not always that in all industries, but in their particular space, because of all of the questions and community and all this stuff going on, I thought they really needed a blog to bring some of that into their own website. That kind of quite hasn't happened yet. It's a slow churn, as I'm sure you know. But that led to me recommending that they have a blog at all, because like I said, they didn't. So we published this on their own internal blog, to answer your question.
Gotcha.
Give us some guidelines on creating that piece of content. Did you create it, or did the client create it and you edit it for SEO value? How did that process work?
Yeah, and that's a great question. In this particular case, and nowadays with most or basically all my clients, they create the content. They either have a writer or a hired writer. And one thing I do is I work with that writer to help them understand how the content should look to rank in Google, right? To like be rank worthy. And so for that particular piece of content, let me say generally what I do for everything is I never try to guess what the content should look like, what the structure should be, what the emotion in it should be, the format, the length. I never try to guess that. I actually look to Google to reflect back to us, because Google's really trying to figure out what is going to serve the user intent when they search for this thing. Right. And I picture all these things in my mind, and whenever I think of a keyword, I'm always matching that to I'm always translating that to the question the user is asking when they're searching for that, and the emotion that they might be feeling. Are they frustrated? Are they in a rush? Are they worried about something? What's the problem they're trying to solve, not only logically but emotionally? And so I look to Google to tell me that. If Google is ranking images at the top, well, guess what? Maybe you should create a piece of content with images in it. If Google's ranking videos mixed in, maybe you should have a video. If Google's ranking a lot of things that are listicle posts, as much as we all hate listicles and they're all overdone, maybe you should create something along those lines. So I really look to Google to help dictate and guide and reflect back what the user might actually be wanting to find. And then that dictates, is this a long form? Is it something that's a story? Is it something that's a how-to? Is it something, like I said, with videos or mixed media? And I'm really not trying to guess at that or necessarily even be creative. I'm just trying to do research to figure out what should be done there.
Sure. Now, for the listeners, what would you say, what tools would you use to find stuff like that?
So I just literally use Google. So when I'm trying to figure out what the content should look like and be structured like, I honestly, and this sounds crazy, and it probably is, I manually just search all the particular terms that we're going to create content around. I search them in Google. And one thing I wanted to touch upon in this conversation today was, one thing I try to do is help and empower and entrain writers. You can tell I'm a podcaster, right? I trip over my words. And train writers how to figure these things out for themselves. So, I'll get on a Skype call with ScreenShare and train a writer how to take the keyword, think of that as a topic, search it in Google, look at what's ranking, literally click every result, look at all 10 results ranking there, and reverse engineer what that piece of content should look like.
Let me be a contrarian here for just a second. So let's say you do this research, which is awesome, by the way, Dan, and great advice, and you find that the top 3 ranking articles are the list format. Is your first instinct to say, hey, I'm going to do another list formatted article? Or is your first instinct to say, for me to step out and look different on the organic search page, I want to do something that's not a list?
I love that question, because both. Yes, sometimes you want to be different. Now, let me back up a step. There's something I call a relevance gap, and I'm sure this makes sense to everyone. But when I'm looking for this, I'm going to completely back away from a SERP that there's no gap in relevance, meaning that the user searches something and most of the results satisfy in terms of relevance what that user's looking for. I'm usually not going to approach that unless my client has a domain authority that's much, much higher than the site's ranking, even though they're relevant, or just a topically known brand relevance around that topic. So with that said, if I'm seeing like a bunch of lists at the top, then you've got to use your intuition a little bit, and you've got to look at other factors like what's the quality of those lists. So if I see 3 listicles at the top, but they all suck, then of course I'm going to have my client create the best, ultimate, much better version of that list. But if they're all great, then sure, maybe adding something of a different value that might contrast what's ranking there already, that might be the way to go. So you've got to look at other factors and use your intuition.
And I think the other built-in strategy is, let's say you take the route where you say you're going to do a better list, which is out there, right? Because you're a subject matter expert or your client is a subject matter expert. You can easily find the people that are already linking to those top articles. Now we don't have to spend hours recruiting backlinks. We can go to those people and say, hey, you've linked to this article. I've added this element to it. I've added this twist, and it's newer, it's fresher. Would you give some thought to linking to this one? And you've got a built-in link recruitment.
Yeah, exactly. Another thing about the value of lists too, sometimes value is being shorter. Like there's all this talk about like long form content, and people do these studies like it's got to be 1,500 to 2,000 words. Like that to me is crazy. Sometimes adding value for the user is being the better, most curated result. So rather than list 100 things that's going to overwhelm somebody, how about 10? How about really do your job and find the ultimate 10 out of thousands of something, whatever the list is, and provide that to the user instead. So I say this to say that it's not always length or having the biggest list that matters. Sometimes better in terms of a list could be better categorization of the things within that list. Oftentimes you'll just see lists of 100 things where there's no rhyme or reason to it. There's no structure. So if you create something that adds value by categorizing and make it easier to navigate through the content in that list, I think that's a huge value add as well.
Yeah, I also think it's important to add more value, because you can't just regurgitate what somebody else has already written. Nowadays, that doesn't work.
Right.
You have to add value.
Yeah, and
yes.
And that's the great thing about working with clients is these clients are subject matter experts, and you've really got to probe into what they do well and to what their expertise is. Sometimes they just need a little prodding to share what they already do. Yeah. They just say it in a different format in another place.
Yeah, I'll cut to another example. I'm going to take a bit of a hard right turn here, but I just had the same client that I talked about before with the case study. I went to see them in-house a month ago. And, a little bit of another aside is I love going to see clients in-house because you learn things that you'd never learn otherwise. But I was having a casual conversation with their sales guy, and something came up where he was like, oh yeah, I've got this PDF. I send it to every single potential lead or prospect. And I was like, oh my goodness, can I see this PDF? And he showed it to me. It was a great piece of content. It was nowhere on their website. Like it was never public. Like he just shares it behind the scenes. And I was like, can we publish this? And it actually targeted a keyword, and it's not published yet, so I don't know the results of it. But Sometimes there's value in finding the content that the sales department is sending to their customers behind the scenes in email and turning that into content publicly. Now he can point all the potential leads to the website. Now they're promoting the website, but also maybe generating more traffic as well. So I think there's a lot of wins that could be had with that.
Back to your first case study, you got the article up. It was a great article. You got organic traffic. Did you do anything to distribute the content as well?
Good question.
Nope. That's what I love about this approach. And again, it goes back to me not being that like salesy, get in the email and send 100 emails to outreach to tell people about the content. Literally, we just found a topic that had a gap, a ranking gap. And, I can get into that more specifically. I talked about relevance. There's domain authority gap. But then we just published the best piece of content to target that topic. Now, this doesn't work all of the time. So I've been doing this for a long time now. What I typically see is about 20 to 30% of the topics that I recommend and that clients publish, usually 20 to 30% of those do end up ranking really well and hit it out of the park with good keyword targeting and with good content positioning. So not every single piece of content you're just going to like hit publish and have it rank and drive traffic, but it is a little bit of playing percentages. Sure. Now there's that other 70%. It's not like they get no traffic at all or have no value. They just don't completely explode like some of the others.
I got a question for you. How does you mentioned, getting into kind of the emotional, psychological shoes of the user and making sure that you tap into that psychological aspect of the query. How does device usage play into this? Because what I may be looking for, the answer that I may want might actually be different, whether I'm on a desktop, on my mobile, or saying, hey, Google, to my Google Home. How is device usage and the wider array of devices kind of playing into this research aspect?
Quite honestly and transparently, I literally have no idea. I have not delved into that specific of a segmentation when doing this research. I tend to focus a lot of my research on desktop and then hoping that that bleeds into mobile results as well. I have not gone as deep as to look at Google Home or Voice or different contexts of this. I think we are fortunate to still be in this realm in 2017 where even though mobile has supposedly outgrown desktop, we can still, in most cases, especially with content marketing, look to desktop for the research and then hope that carries into mobile. What I do for mobile is I review all my client sites for mobile usability, of course, mobile friendliness, of course, but also I look through it manually. I make sure myself as a user doesn't get frustrated, that I can consume the content. So for me, it's not really so much about the keyword positioning or any change in content per se. It's really just the best mobile UX and accessibility practices, and then hoping that if they publish content and then it ends up on a mobile device, whether it's responsive or they have a M.dot, that it's user-friendly enough that the user can consume it there.
Okay.
Now, you wrote a blog post, interestingly enough, titled, Why I Don't Want to Share My Content with You. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I think it was titled, Why I Will Never Ask You to Share My Content.
Right. Fascinating approach. Tell the audience about that.
Yeah, so I understand this is a very black and white way to position things. My philosophy, to give some context to it, is I would prefer to not – let me give you an example. So there was somebody I met at a conference last year. He's very well known in the marketing space, great guy. We hit it off. We had a great conversation. The next day I got a DM from him that said, hey, we just published this thing. Can you tweet it for me? And it was kind of like things like that really rubbed me the wrong way. It's like we didn't really have much of a relationship. We hadn't really, exchanged much value from one another other than meeting and have a 10-minute conversation. But just that feeling of like this person kind of just considered me as somebody with Twitter followers that would share content for them. That just feels so superficial and so meaningless. Rather than the depth, and what I really feel great about is trying to do great content, create great content, be of value to people, and then let that sharing happen on its own. I've never DM'd somebody and said, hey, can you share my thing? Or emailed somebody and said, hey, can I get an upvote on growth hackers? Like, I don't do that kind of stuff because I want to know. And it's not this like, it's not a completely this moralistic thing. It's not really that at all. It's that because I want the truth. And what I want the truth of is my content good enough? Am I doing things good enough to get a reaction from people, to get my stuff to spread on its own? I don't want to mistakenly think irrationally that I'm successful somehow with content. And I don't know that if I've asked tons of people to upvote it on inbound or to share it or to link to it. So I prefer to know naturally how things fall. And I know a lot of people disagree with that. But that's really been my approach from day one, and I've never wavered from it.
Sounds like somebody needs to create Tinder for SEOs, where you can swipe and see, okay, this guy's sharing philosophy is this. This guy's a pretty immediate sharer, and just, kind of pick it out that way.
Yeah. Swipe left, swipe right.
Swipe left, yeah.
Well, so long as I quote you, hopefully you will share. I mean, it's like, come on. I just gave you some love with your name and a link. You could at least share that.
Hi, everybody at Facebook. If you cannot hear us talking right now, if you go to Spreaker, you can listen to the show and then, I guess, throw up 2 windows. I don't know.
Right on. Well, there is a comment in the feed for Facebook Live where you can go to Spreaker and listen to our guest.
Yes.
So it is there for you. Just click on that link so that you can hear what our guest is having to say while we're sitting here nice and quietly.
It looks like it's working for a few people. I have a few people saying there's a little bit of a delay, but they're enjoying it.
Right.
Yeah.
Great. And then you can also type your questions on Facebook if you like. We'll get the binoculars out and
well, so for those of you that are actually watching on the video, you're seeing me playing with my mobile device. It's because I'm actually checking Facebook where I can respond since I can't reach all the way over there.
Multitask. So I forgot to do this in the beginning of the show, and I'm going to go ahead and do it now. But Dan, if you could give us your background, a little bit about yourself, and I realized I did it after like halfway into the show, so I'm going to let you go ahead and take your time to do that. Tell us about your podcast.
Sure. I'll try to make it quick. So I'll cut to sort of the chase of why I got into SEO. SEO is something that really saved me in terms of I didn't have a way to make a living, and I had just moved to this area where I am now in Worcester, Massachusetts. When I got married, I left all of my piano students behind in New Hampshire. I left all of my music work behind in New Hampshire. This was about 2006 or 7. And so when I got to Central Massachusetts, I had no piano students. I had no work. So I had to find a way to start to build up my teaching studio again. So I looked to SEO to do that. So I built myself a website, got it in Google, started doing a ton of local SEO. At this time, I had known a little bit about SEO, but I really was self-teaching myself a lot very quickly. And within, I want to say, a period of 3 to 6 to maybe 9 months, I was starting to get a lot of traction, and then my studio was full in about a year. So that was the first like really personal and tangible way that SEO, that I felt the effects of SEO being able to help me, going from like having no work in a new location to being able to pay the bills and survive.
Nice.
And that was part of it. And then at the same time, I was helping my dad. My dad's a sculptor, and he has 2 businesses and 2 websites online. One is e-commerce and one is a service-based business. And through that experience, I taught myself a little bit of hacky PHP and SQL, and using a text editor. I built him an e-commerce website from scratch using like a text editor and a SQL database. And that was such a great experience. And not only did I learn just how the web works fundamentally, which I recommend everyone really needs to, like, if you don't know HTML and CSS and servers and that kind of thing, like at least learn that. It was very educational in that realm, but then I got to practice coding canonical tags on every page, coding, different meta description templates. And so that experience was really that, like, I went from local SEO with my music lessons and then to like e-commerce and a much bigger scale with my dad's businesses. And then after that, I realized that the most fun part of all of that I was doing was the SEO work. It was the challenge of trying to take a website from point A to point B in Google. And I realized that I could then help other people with that as well. So, I'm going to skip over a lot of stuff here, but fast forward to 2017, I co-own Evolving SEO with my wife, Sarah. We've gone through, several different phases of, was that a cough or a laugh?
Sorry, no, I was, go on. I was looking at myself on the Facebook live feed, and the delay was cracking me up. Sorry.
Okay. I thought something about my wife was funny.
No.
I'm very self-conscious. And then, so we've gone through some phases. We had an employee for a while. We've had different contractors, but essentially now Evolving SEO is a two-person company, myself and my wife. I'm kind of the face of it. I do the consulting. She helps with the business and a lot of reports and things like that. I also have my podcast, Experts on the Wire. Very similar to Search Talk Live. It's mainly an SEO-focused podcast. Interview SEO and online marketing experts.
Yeah, I want to capture something that you talked about in your first experience there, which is a great story, by the way. What about local search and organic search? As you present search to potential clients, do you combine those two topics, or do you break them out into are they two different skill sets?
Yeah, that's a great question. I basically do almost no local search at all, unless it's a national or global company that happens to have local locations. So in my mind, local SEO, the mechanics of it are completely different than non-local SEO. So that's a great question, because that's one of the firm lines in the sand that I draw when it comes to client work. So I focus, it was about 2010, 11, as I was growing and getting more clients and bigger companies, I shifted my focus away from local SEO to focus on non-local.
Yeah, that's a great distinction. A lot of people in the industry now seem to be blending those together.
Yeah.
And I think one of the reasons that's happening is because as organic becomes so elusive, with the results varying with the AI now, what are some of the things that you can actually do to influence results? Local search is kind of that set of tasks that you can do that really measurably move the meter somewhat quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I should say that I bring local SEO elements into non-local SEO, meaning like the idea of citations. That's something you can certainly carry into a non-local company, but I won't do projects with companies that only serve a local customer. So it's not like I'm not doing local SEO things for national companies. I just don't work with local companies.
One of the things that is a big part of your plan that we got to talk a little bit about the show is YouTube. And I think you've got some interesting and novel philosophies as it relates to using YouTube for organic SEO. Can you walk us through that?
Hold on. Can we take a break real quick?
Well, let's take a break. That's because it's a great question.
We'll get that right after the break.
Hold that thought.
Search Talk Live is sponsored by the Robert Palmer family of companies. Check out robertpalmercompanies.com for more information.
A press release is a very effective way to draw attention to your business, and something every company should take advantage of. Press releases are a great way for your company to announce new product launches, company milestones, and new partnerships, and even up-and-coming events. The hard part is knowing which press release distribution service to use and which is the most effective. Well, I have the answer. PR Underground. PR Underground is both an effective and affordable distribution service. For just $49.95, PR Underground guarantees your next press release will be on Google News, digitaljournal.com, social media, and over 150 news and TV websites such as ABC, NBC, Fox, and CBS. Now, if you upgrade to the Diamond plan, your announcements will appear on Yahoo Finance and an additional 100 news sites and blogs. This is one of the tools I recommend you use for PR, marketing, and SEO. PR Underground offers a huge distribution at a great price. Go to prunderground.com, that's prunderground.com, and send out your next press release. Enter the code SearchTalkLive, all one word, and get 25% off your first press release.
Find the true value of your home when you log on. Homevalue.com.
Get your questions in on Twitter. Type hashtag SearchTalkLive and your question. Now back to the show.
All right, we're back, and we're talking with Dan Shure of Evolve SEO. We're talking content and how to rank it. What are the elements of ranking the content? Let's get back to your question now. What were you saying, Matt?
Yeah, Dan's got some really innovative techniques on using YouTube for organic rank. Dan, can you go into those?
Sure. And to reframe it a little, we were chatting before we hit record. Something came up about asking about, is there any news that I think people aren't talking about that they should be talking about? And that's where I chimed in and I said, YouTube isn't news, but I think the idea of YouTube being the second biggest search engine, having, I think the stats over 1 billion like active users or something like that, it's a really important platform and discussion that only now are some SEOs starting to talk about it. And only now are some businesses starting to leverage YouTube. And we could go in a lot of directions in this, but that was really the first and foremost thing that I wanted to put forth, maybe as the beginning of a discussion here, is just that I think people need to take YouTube way more seriously. It's something I've been doing on my own a little bit. I've been trying to publish a lot more YouTube videos as of late. You can check out my channel. It's Evolving SEO. I've been doing some vlog-like videos as well, just really experimenting with the platform. I love video and digital media in general anyways as a content medium. So it's just been a lot of fun for me too. But when you think about YouTube, there's a few ways we can go in this. But number one is the technology that YouTube has brought into the recommended videos on the right, the trending page, how people are discovering videos. I believe, and this might just be a random hunch of mine, there's perhaps some of that technology going back into Google's search engine. And let me be a little more concrete about that. I recently spoke to a company that wanted to potentially hire me for SEO. That didn't happen, but it turns out their founder invented the technology that YouTube had been using for the last 5 years to refine their machine learning algorithm for recommending videos on the right-hand side. So you're watching a video on YouTube, and you get the recommended on the right. And it was something like they've grown engagement in YouTube like 30% because of the AI and machine learning that they're putting into figuring out how do we recommend videos that are going to keep people in YouTube. Now, that's not search. That's an algorithm recommending content. Now, this could be a hunch, but I feel like I've been seeing in Google lately more personalized results that have that sort of machine learning, like this mysterious functionality and behavior going. I'll give you an example. Like, I'll do a search for one thing. I'll hit enter. I'll look at it. And then I'll go back and maybe a little bit later, I'll search for the same thing. And the results swap. Like the number 1 and 2 immediately swap right away. Mm-hmm. Or I'll go incognito and everything's very different. And I really feel as if Google is taking this idea of, it's not ranking really. It's this interesting thing, like they're looking at my behavior, my interests, the topics I like, what I've clicked on before, what I've visited before. And they're really trying to turn this into like this personal algorithm almost, where they're going to experiment with swapping around results and like putting this thing here and that thing there and bringing in SERP features in and out. Almost in this YouTube-like way as far as what they've done with their recommended videos. So I think if we as SEOs can understand what's happening in YouTube educationally and intellectually, that might help us do SEO better in Google. But then number 2 goes back to what I said. It's just YouTube as a platform is huge. Search in it is huge. It's the second biggest search engine. And so we haven't barely even scratched the surface. I'll end this little rant here, this little ramble with 2 things I want to point you to. One is just today, Justin Briggs tweeted his incredible slides from Search Love. Just go to Justin Briggs's feed and you'll see it, or I'll give it to you. They're amazing. He goes way more in depth than I've ever seen on YouTube SEO. And number 2 is an interview I did with Roberto Blake on my podcast earlier this year. You could follow him or check out that interview in general. He's super knowledgeable about the YouTube algorithm as well. But I just think it's a really important conversation, and I think that more and more people are going to be using YouTube, leveraging it, trying to figure out how search works, using it for business, and I think there's a lot of opportunity there now.
Well, that kind of brings up a question for me. So you talked a little bit about filling a gap in relevance and that sort of stuff, and that sometimes the right content to fill that gap isn't necessarily a blog post. It could be an image, it could be a video or whatever. So what about that moment when, say, an article turns into this fabulous unicorn and I want to double down on its effectiveness, and repurpose, reuse. How can I re-envision that written content as a video or as an infographic or as whatever else? Because obviously, as human beings, we all have different types of learning styles. And although a huge number of people might have gotten a lot of value out of the original piece of content, how many more people could we reach by repurposing that content in other ways?
That's a great strategy. I mean, that kind of answers the question in a way, whereas if you have a piece of content that's popular, you should put it in video, audio, and slide format or any other medium and get it into different platforms. I think there's huge value in that. And again, it goes back to being a bit of an untapped opportunity. One thing Justin shows in his slides, and the listeners might have seen lately as well, is sometimes in search now, you search for something, and if Google ranks a YouTube video, they're actually finding the timestamp where that video answers your specific question, if it's how to change a flat tire or whatever it is. So I certainly think YouTube is a great match for obviously these tutorial types of things. But sure, if you have a piece of content that's an article, maybe just somebody is lazy and they don't want to read it, and YouTube's just the mechanism to provide the audio version of that content with even a minimum or a little bit of visual to go along with that. I think that has value as well. One thing you can also do is, like I said before, create an audio version of your piece of content, post it to SoundCloud, embed it in your page, and you're adding value because now you're giving the user multiple ways that they consume that content, number one. And number two, you can be discovered within those networks themselves. So you could be, that video that you're using YouTube to host can be discovered within YouTube as well. So a lot of opportunity, and a lot of these spaces haven't been oversaturated with video content yet. Right. And so that's another opportunity too that maybe you were getting at, is a lot of these spaces have way too much text content. We all know that, but not enough video. And that's where a lot of people can come in. And then the last thing I'll add about video is there's a skill gap that it takes to create an engaging, interesting, successful, high quality video. Meaning that, like, nowadays, I think if you're just going to be a talking head in the video, you've got to be really good or have some natural charisma or natural storytelling abilities to just sit there on camera and do that. Because if not, you really want to be looking at your YouTube engagement stats. Where do people drop off as they're watching the video? Sure. You really want to think about the format and the structure and like doing things to keep people engaged in the video and try to work against them dropping off. So certainly, I think that gap in skill, the fact there's a lot of lower quality videos that could be done in a much higher quality, that's an opportunity as well.
Well, and video kind of gives us an opportunity to tap in different types of content creation. So one of the things that I've been talking about a lot is voice search, and particularly semantic usage. So when we're using verbal language rather than written language, we tend to use different types of language. And sometimes in order to get a written piece to the right flavor of language usage, sometimes it's better to record a video of whoever the topic matter expert is talking about it, and then write from that transcript of verbal communication first. It changes our semantic usage of language, gives us a whole bunch more options, and puts us in a position where we've got video created, we've got audio created, and we're writing from that aspect of the content creation process. And sometimes for people that maybe aren't quite as adept writers as some of us are, having that aspect of being able to sit down and talk about it gets us to the point where we can put text on the page.
Right.
And
that could go ahead. Sorry.
You basically spelled out Gary Vaynerchuk's model, right, of creating content. He does videos, he turns them into audio, and then he's got an editor that creates text. So
yeah,
go ahead. That's all I had to add.
It could also lead into a deeper rabbit hole to where, once you create that video content or audio content, that it gives you a more broader vision once you've, actually played it back and listened to it and make it more in depth,
I think this is one of the great takeaways for the show. A lot of people who listen to the show feel frustrated. Hey, I think content generation is great, but how do I do it? How do I create that much content? And it's really less about creating a lot of content than it is about creating really good pieces and repurposing them.
Right.
And I might have to, I don't know if I disagree with you technically, but I think that it depends on your audience. I mean, some people are fine with, look at Ty, whatever his name is, the marketing guy. He used Ty Lopez. He used a cell phone, and he did that video. I can't believe I brought that up. You're in my garage video. He did that with an iPhone, and that's been viewed millions of times.
The thing, this is an interesting thing, and I've thought about this a lot. To go on a slight tangent, I've sort of an open-ended question for everyone is, why is that guy so charismatic? Like, his ad will start before a video that I really want to watch, and I find myself 3 minutes later, I've watched this guy's stupid ad where he's in a field talking about buying land. And I'm like, why was this interesting? I can't figure it out, and it really bothers me because I know he's a bit of a salesman, right? So I don't know. I want to toss that to you all. Why is that guy so? Why are his videos so interesting? I don't know.
I think science calls it the Kardashian effect.
Yeah. I think his marketing is terrible. I mean, sorry if he's listening. But I think it's just because you're like, so like, what is this guy doing? He's, there's stories been done on him where he's his Lamborghini and all that stuff's rented and, all that stuff was bullcrap. But I don't know if that's true or not. But yeah, I don't know, man.
He'll be our next guest.
Come on the show and explain that to us, please.
Well, Michelle started talking about a topic that I want you to expand on, Dan, just a little bit. Where are we going with voice search, and how is that going to affect your SEO strategy going forward?
Yeah, it's interesting. Vanessa Fox, who I interviewed on my podcast, said a really interesting thing, and I love the way she framed this, and I thought about this unconsciously for a very long time, is voice search right now is a difference in input, meaning that we're just using voice instead of a keyboard to type in our search, but the output is still the same for now. The output, unless we're talking about Google Home, is still web pages or what you see in the SERP. So I think for me, it doesn't really get interesting until the amount of people using voice as the output starts to really skew in that direction. Mm-hmm. I don't quite see that happening yet. I mean, there's a lot of talk about Alexa skills. It's something I want to do some research on. I haven't, unfortunately, had the time to do much of that yet. But until I really see the output changing a whole lot, to me, it's really just the input may be causing a difference in how people are phrasing their searches. Supposedly they're longer, they're in natural language and questions. But I feel like at least for Google, they're doing our work of translating those longer voice-like questions into, this is one thing Hummingbird is, to my understanding, is it translates the search into a more common phrase, right? So if I'm asking Google, where's the nearest Pizza Hut? It's just searching Pizza Hut, right? It's just translating the query behind the scenes. So to me, I'm not really focusing much on that right now because I don't see a big difference in how we're going about doing SEO, at least not at this stage.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. I mean, it's the semantics. Regardless of how they ask it, that particular question, Google known based off billions of searches what their intent is.
Mm-hmm. Right. Are you guys aware that Schema has a pending markup called Speakable?
Yes.
That is something that I find fascinating. That now it hasn't been launched. It's not available to us to use just yet, but it's definitely on the pending list. Who knows when we'll get it, but my suspicion is it'll be fairly soon. And basically, the Schema markup allows us to highlight what lines of text on a page are the most appropriate for text-to-voice translation. And that's kind of one of those things that's running on the background that makes me think, okay, we're doubling down on voice search and voice content.
Yeah.
I think one of the drivers of that is if you look at Google's new deal with, I think it's Target, Costco, Walmart, now you've got a distribution channel for more of these appliances. So I think we'll see even a greater rise in the use of the appliances, which is then going to affect it. Maybe the reason why we haven't seen some of this effect that we're talking about is because it's really a relatively small number of the total search volume. Now that you got big players into the distribution mechanism of the appliances, it could be different 12 months from now.
Mm-hmm. Dan?
this is really cool. I'm going to tweet this afterwards, after we end the show. I'll credit you. Make sure to drop your Twitter handle in the Skype chat there.
Or the mic.
Yeah. That is really cool, this speakable thing. I didn't really have anything to add. I'm sorry.
One thing, too, I'm seeing a lot more, Matt, I'm sure you've seen this, too, is in the Google keyword tool. A lot of, this near me, that near me,
right.
Those kind of things are starting to show up a lot in the...
There's a newer article now that's showing that the near me searches have peaked and are now on the decline because the AI is automatically detecting that that's your intent and it's going to feed you those anyway, which is we're in a fast-changing world.
So it's dropping that in the search.
Right.
So even though you put it there, it's dropped.
That was a loophole I used for a while. I had some clients create pages literally with the text near me in their industry and rank for those, but Google has started to work against that. But for the longest time, it was a loophole where I was shocked Google wasn't turning the phrase near me into this local intent and then just using IP locations. So for a while, you could rank by using literally the phrase near me.
Right.
But now, like you said, that's starting to diminish.
I used to kill not provided.
Well, and that goes back to what I was asking about devices, because when we do a search for a place, a brand that obviously is a storefront brand on a mobile device, Google's going to automatically take into account the GPS location of that mobile device to give me a relevant result that is physically near that device.
So going back to the content thing, I guess what we're trying to tell everyone in content is not just text on a page. It can be, podcast, it could be videos, it could be all that stuff, or all encompassing.
Yeah, exactly. I think I'll jump in with like a little hack using SEMrush that I think your audience might find valuable.
Yes, we love hacks.
Yeah. So speaking of different types of content, this goes a little bit in the opposite direction, but one thing you can do with SEMrush is search for slideshare.net. Are they still .net or .com? I don't know. It doesn't matter. Search for SlideShare in SEMrush, and then run a filter for your topic, and then anything that SlideShare ranks for on page 1. And what we're doing here is we're trying to find random SlideShare presentations that are ranking in Google, because quite often that's a sign that Google is really trying to dig for a result to rank there. Because I've seen 9 times out of 10, Google would rather rank a well-crafted article or blog post, informational piece of content over just a random SlideShare. So what you're doing there is you're uncovering, using SEMrush and the power of their database, these SlideShare posts that frankly most of the time don't deserve to rank where they are. And then you can go create a better version of that piece of content on your own site. And guess what? Maybe you create your own slides and you embed that into your thing to satiate that, because maybe there's a little bit of Google wanting that type of result there. But that's one example of a hack where you can find things ranking in one medium and then create it in another. And Justin Briggs has a very similar tip in his presentation from today about YouTube. Do the same thing. Search YouTube in SEMrush and then figure out what YouTube videos are ranking on page 1. Filter for your topics, filter for volume. And then from there, you're looking at like, where are videos ranking that maybe we can do a better piece of content on our own domain, embed a video in there. Or oftentimes videos will rank, I'm sure you've seen this, that are slightly off topic, and maybe you can create one that's a little more specific and relevant. So I love those hacks that kind of like are leveraging platforms with different mediums.
Absolutely.
Because then you have an opportunity to create content in a higher quality medium.
Yeah.
Good.
That's definitely thinking out of the box there.
Great job.
Yeah. So we are, what we got? 10 minutes? 20 minutes?
Yeah.
Are we going to chat about podcasting?
Yeah, I wanted to bring that up, but I also wanted to talk about the
WCAG.
Yes, let's run through that real quick.
So we had a little bit of discussion prior to the show about the future role or the future impact of WCAG, which is Website Content Accessibility Guidelines. And for the listeners for the show, it is basically the ADA says that points of public access has to be accessible to people with and without disabilities. And the current law is looking at websites and saying, hey, those are points of public access. So your website may have to be accessible to people with disabilities, which would be people with visual impairments who use screen reader software. And there's an interesting correlation between SEO and WCAG because the bot is really a visually impaired user that has to understand the website content.
That's why Michelle is doing all the signing during the show.
Right.
I'm kidding. What we're finding, though, is law firms are going, well, I call it wild, wild west on this situation. They're finding sites that are not compliant, and they're filing lawsuits because it's low-hanging fruit for them, and they can sue you.
Right. But if your site's optimized really well, you're probably 80% down the road, right? You've done all of your alt tags, your metadata is in place on that. There may be a few design issues you have to tackle.
Sure.
But a really good SEO is probably, hands down, more tuned into these aspects than someone who's not already tuned into SEO.
I think one thing we don't talk about quite enough in our SEO space is the ranking differences varying by industry. So I suspect there's probably niches or industries or site types that it's more important for these compliances to be in place because the audience might skew more towards having these accessibility issues. So that's just, an open-ended thing that I want to throw out there, and like everybody should be thinking about not only from the accessibility standpoint, but just rankings in general. I don't think rankings are, the same as far as their factors across different industries and different types of sites.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no question. I think we see that with medical versus, let's say, for home services, where with medical, people are looking for answers to questions. They're researching things. Deeper, more robust, more valuable content is going to be more important in a site like that than if you're doing a pest control service or a landscaping service where people aren't really going deep to figure out what's going on with their lawn. They're just looking for a vendor.
Right. And so you're going to see differences between B2C and B2B because obviously the B2C space, we have to serve a bit more of the general public than we do the B2B side of things too.
Absolutely.
I about a year or two ago, I started a little project with it was actually a college that was looking to be ADA compliant. And for whatever reason, this project didn't see through to the end of it. But I have a list here of some of the things that actually were required that I think the listeners might find interesting. One was we found that PDF-only content needs to have an HTML page equivalent. That's one checkbox. Another was to caption and transcribe all video and audio content. So those people with hearing impairments. Another would be you need to use the label element on all form fields. And another would be image link should describe the link destination as well as the image. So there's all these little details that we found in the research process. And I'll just mention as well, and I can give you these links if you want for the show notes, ada.gov and hhs.gov had a lot of information if anybody's interested in what these requirements are.
Very cool. All right, so let's switch gears again. Let's talk about podcasting.
Yes. I thought it'd be a fun discussion. I know I messaged you, Rob, about this behind the scenes. I thought it'd be a fun discussion because there's not many SEO podcasts out there. I mean, there's probably a good handful. But here we are, right? I have an SEO podcast. Obviously you do. So I thought it'd make for a fun discussion. And actually one thing that I was curious about asking you first is, what are your challenges right now in the SEO podcast? Are you trying to grow your audience? Is it about finding guests? Is it keeping up with the maintenance of, having to create show notes? Like, what are things to you right now that are challenging about running an SEO podcast?
Well, I think it's really getting past the groupies on the way in, right?
No, I don't have that problem. But I would have to say content because I'm not a content person. And as you just said with what we're just talking about, converting those things to content other than audio, to converting the podcast to text. I mean, it's very expensive. I mean, we do an hour show and usually, somebody wants $2 to $3 per word or anyway, anywhere around $65 to $75 per show.
Yep.
To do the content. So that's kind of my weakness there. I mean, finding guests, I've been really lucky there. We've been people. I used to have to chase after people to find people for the show.
It's good that you have co-hosts with additional connections.
Absolutely. I kind of slacked for a while, so like I was lacking this month, but filled it up quite fast once I started reaching out to people. So that from time to time can be a stretch, but I am trying to grow the show. I mean, not for popularity's sake, but for getting the good word out. I'm sure that's the reason you do your podcast too, along with getting listeners. But the main thing, I mean, there's no monetary value for this show. I mean, I'm not making millions of dollars or anything. I do it, and we all do it to help others. Because the biggest reason I got into it was because there's so much bad information out there. And, I mean, you hear it from professionals to, well, the so-called professionals to from everybody. And we try to give content that, you know, it's evergreen. I mean, you can go back a year to listen to the show, and it still can apply to today. But that's the main reason we're doing it. I actually started it out trying, I said, you know, I had somebody offer me to do a podcast. I was like, okay, I'll try it. I was going to do 5 shows and call it a day. But then I got hooked. At first, the first 5 shows were just absolutely crap. The content was good, but it was nervousness and all this other stuff, and it was terrible.
Well, and podcasting is one of those spaces that is not saturated. So when you compare podcasting to, say, blogging, there are absolutely billions of blogs on the web now. Whereas podcasts, the really good ones, the really consistent ones, the ones that you can count on to be there, are only in the hundreds of thousands. And most of those may not go on for very long. You know, that a lot of people try it. They realize, oh, this is a serious time commitment to actually do it and do it well and do it consistently. And a lot of podcasts drop off after a while. So podcasting right now is still, you know, success goes to the last man standing.
Yeah, and I believe, I mean, on a side note, the icing on the cake, so to speak, is we have listeners all over the world. I mean, we have Australia. I mean, you name it. We have somebody listening there. For some reason, 7% of our listeners are in Sweden. Why? I don't know. Maybe it's Gary and what's his face?
Right.
I'm just kidding.
Some Googlers in Europe.
But we have a good reputation because we always give out good content. I mean, that's the main thing, my main concern. I don't want to have somebody coming on here and promote their agency or whatever, but I do appreciate that, and I give them that time. But I'm on a rant, so I'm going to let you speak now. What was your reason behind it?
Behind starting the podcast?
Yeah.
There's 2, really. One is personal, and I just love, like I said, digital media. Before I actually ever did music professionally, I did TV production in high school before there was even digital video editing. And so I have a huge fondness and just love creating digital content. This is fun for me. Like right now, this is probably the most fun part of my day. When I do my interviews, that's the most fun part of my week.
Sure.
And so, you know, getting to having an excuse to talk to other SEOs in the industry and have them want to talk to me and exchange ideas and then share that with everyone, that's just so much fun. And, you know, I love getting tweets from people and emails from people and seeing the reviews on iTunes and seeing that people are enjoying the show, that they're listening. You know, I'm sort of a performer at heart, or a creative type at heart, coming from a dad who's a sculptor, and then I was a musician. So that side of me really gets to come out when I'm doing podcasting.
Yeah. Now,
as far as in the SEO space, I saw the same thing too. There's a couple podcasts in the SEO space that are actually good, right? When it comes to providing quality SEO information, but unfortunately, there's a lot out there that are not so good.
Yeah.
And so I saw that as a value that I could add to the SEO space to fit in with your show and a few other shows that are out there that really are doing quality stuff, to make sure people are getting the right information, that they're getting the updated information, that they're not hearing some, snake oil strategy.
Sure.
That's about like helping people. Like I hate hearing stories about people hearing this like crazy link building thing, and then they go try it and they ruin their website and they lose their rankings and they lose their business. Like that really sucks. And that makes an impact on them in the real world, positive or negative. And so I like being another voice in the audio space for SEO and providing the best SEO audio education that I can.
Sure. That's a great point, because my point, there's so many people that, they're not purposely putting out bad information, but I'm hoping that maybe one person that was thinking in the wrong way listens to the show and maybe changes their ways, so to speak, maybe going from a black hat to a gray hat or, white hat or whatever. Mm-hmm. But
I think I could tie a bow on it by saying this is something I went through personally when I was doing SEO in 2007 to 2010. I listened to the SEO 101 podcast almost every day or every time it came out. Mm-hmm. That really helped me when I was on my journey learning SEO at that time. So I sort of have this personal fondness for SEO podcasts because it helped me so much. And I'm grateful for that show that I was able to listen to at that time. So I hope that happens to people now.
Right on. Well, I know I run into instances where I'm at local networking events and stuff like that, where I've had this really good advanced discussion about search and social, or social and content, or something that's more than just how often should I tweet or what time should I tweet, actually going into something that's a lot more strategic, a lot more thought out as far as a marketing use for a particular channel. And I usually get asked, why aren't there more discussions like this? Well, there are. You just need to know where to find them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's almost like politics and religion. Everybody has their own idea of
right.
how it works, But so I think it's time.
It's time for Believe It or Leave It. And Dan, what we'd like to do is give you 3 statements we did find on the internet, so they have to be true. And we're going to ask you if you can tell our audience whether they should believe it or whether they should leave it. You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, number 1, because of the influence of AI in the Google algorithm, SEO reporting will no longer soon include ranking data, but only contain data related to the amount of marketing qualified leads.
All right. This is a stupid statement, forgive my frankness. It's like, it's not black and white. Rankings have a value in certain instances and then no value in others. So, okay, to satiate the question, I don't put rankings in reports. But it's like they still have meaning. There's still an importance to tracking them, especially when you're trying to diagnose an algorithm hit or a traffic drop. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I think that's like that. To me, that's people arguing these little minutia things when if you set the big picture in the right direction with your client, these conversations become meaningless.
So at the end, you tell our audience to believe it in certain cases, but leave it in others.
Yeah, and I know that's kind of a cop-out answer, like saying, "Oh, it depends," but
sometimes that's the most valid answer.
Yeah, to me, that's like I said, that's an argument between parties that are arguing about the wrong thing, really.
Yeah. All right, question number 2: getting on the knowledge graph will soon become one of the SEO's top priorities.
Where are you getting these statements from? Top priority. That's not a priority. That's a result. It's not a goal. It's the result of being a brand. It's a result of having authority and influence and all these other factors that get you in the all right, next.
Man, I love your
You're going to have to get enthusiastic about this, Dan, or we can't go on.
All right.
I don't have question 3.
Here you go. Last one.
Google will purchase Twitter in 2018. Believe
Nope.
it or leave it.
Don't believe it.
Really? Tell us why you don't believe that.
I think Twitter is not. They haven't, to my knowledge, they haven't shown the ability to be profitable. Maybe that's why Google would buy them, because they want to solve that problem and turn it into that. But Google, I don't see Google buying Twitter. Twitter's technology is not strong enough. Like there's search. Have you tried searching in Twitter?
Exactly.
I go to Google to search for stuff in Twitter. Like their technology is really terrible.
They
and
really don't get the data that they're collecting.
Yeah, but that's where the value is. They have over 150 billion users.
Yeah.
I think that's where the value is.
And that's why this rumor continues to come up again.
Well,
is
so
because
long as they can continue to hold those users, they're beginning to bleed users.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think the rumor continues to surface because of exactly what Dan said. Their technology is not good. But if you combine the Google search appliance with the content that Twitter has, what do you get out of that? And Google certainly has purchased non-profitable businesses before.
Right. But Twitter hasn't been able to sell itself to how many different companies now have looked at it?
Disney, Google.
No, thanks.
Yeah. I think that takes us to, Dan, part of the closing part of the show is your Search Talk Live tattoo, where we're going to ask you to give our listeners the best, most succinct, compact, powerful piece of advice that is tattooable to let them remember your appearance on the show.
Oh, goodness. You mentioned this at the beginning of the hour. I've been thinking about it. All that's coming to mind is something that's probably a little silly, but it's this phrase that I have for SEO, which is search ecosystem optimization. We live in a world where we're not optimizing stuff in a search engine. That's kind of ridiculous. The search engine is one piece of the actual reality that we're operating in, which is the real world, the internet, and then search engines that crawl stuff on the internet. So when I think about doing SEO, it's totally shifted my mindset to think about, well, part of the search ecosystem is search engines collect data, aka keywords with search volume, and we're human beings in the real world looking to that data for insights, information to understand consumers. And it works in so many different directions. And so I have a video on YouTube where I kind of go off about search ecosystem optimization. And I'm not trying to rename SEO. I just really like to have a clear image of reality in my mind. It's how I operate best. It's how I approach challenging questions. And so that would be my tattoo. As kind of like silly and philosophical as it is, that's what I would say.
That is a sleeve.
Yeah. Really well done and a great remark and a great philosophy.
Yeah, I can tell. You should write a song about it.
There's a rap in there somewhere.
Right? So there's a song there. But I want to thank you for being on the show, Dan. It's been awesome. Lots of unbelievable information. If somebody wants to go listen to your podcast, where is it at?
You can just Google Experts in the Wire. It's on iTunes, all the different places, my website. And also, I guess I'll just mention my Twitter, @Dan_SHURE. You know how to use the web. You can find my Twitter, find my podcast. It's all there. It's all on Google. Just search my name.
Yeah. And Dan, it was a real pleasure because I love it when we have a guest on that not only listens to the show, but contributes content to the show. I mean, it's nice to have that.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you very much for being on the show. It was a good honor.
Great.
Thanks a lot. Oh, and not for Dan, but I wanted to mention to everyone that's listening also, I got an email today that we are now being syndicated through Amazon Echo. What that means, I don't know. But I guess you can go to Amazon Echo and say,
play the last episode of Search Talk Live.
Yeah.
I'm going to try it when I get home.
Yeah.
I think I will too.
I don't have Amazon Echo. Maybe Google Home will pick up on that.
Yeah. Dan, thanks so much and have a great rest of the day.
Yeah.
Thank you, too.
All right, guys. Thanks again. It's been another awesome episode. I want to thank Michelle for actually live sitting in on the show and participating. It was awesome. Matt, same as always. You're awesome. You contribute a lot to the show. We'll see you next week, guys. And on next week's show, we have... I have it. Hold on. I actually did 4 weeks worth of content. Oh, Cyrus Shepard, formerly of Moz. Boy, I almost messed that up. We're going to do some more content and SEO. See you next week, guys. Thanks a lot.
Search Talk Live is sponsored by the Robert Palmer family of companies.
Find the true value of your home when you log on. HomeValue.com.
If you have questions for Search Talk Live, or you're interested in being a guest or a sponsor of the show, email Robert at searchtalklive.com. That's searchtalklive.com.